They chiseled the noses off of statues. They chiseled the lips off of statues. They chiseled the features that would show without a doubt that this statue is black, that these people are African, that these are African people. We know that it was Napoleon and his troops that blew the nose off the Sphinx. That was documented. The Los Angeles Times actually documented that as well. So it's like, what's going on here? If this was about making these people money, if it wasn't about hiding the history of a people, if it wasn't about reprogramming the people and oppressing the people and taking away their history, if it wasn't about that, then why are they trying to hide our past? Why did they not teach us our past? Why did they not tell us about the civilizations and the empires that black people had? But yet they themselves are trying to steal our past and pass ancient Egypt off as a white civilization. What is going on? So if it was about Jesus coming to save us from sin, or Allah coming to save us from sin, if it was about that, why not tell us, why not show us the sin that we had? Why not show us our ancient races, our ancient civilizations, and what they was doing that was so bad that you had to enslave us to save us from it? Why not show us these things? Why destroy it? Why hide it? And why do they choose to, amongst themselves, study our ancient civilizations, African civilizations amongst themselves, and tell us that we were monkeys and savages running around in the jungle, unsophisticated, uneducated, and not smart? I hope y'all paying attention, because this is just the beginning. I'm just setting the stage for something much more deeper. I have to show you, the beginning of where this stuff is starting from, for you to really get later on what this whole system is and what it's about. So now you can see kind of sort of the premise where it's kind of stemming from a little bit. So I hope y'all been paying attention. I hope y'all strapped in. It's going to get a lot more deeper. This is like just the beginning. And if you a conscious person, then you know exactly where I'm kind of going to, maybe. But I'm alluding to a lot of things so far, but this is just a premise. I'm setting the stage for something a lot more. And, as they was talking about, you see they was hiding a lot of our past. The Smithsonian is well known for hiding a lot of artifacts found by black people. We know about the Olmecs. We know the Olmec heads that was found down in Mexico. They found some in America as well. We know about the big Olmec heads that they've been finding with African features. We can prove 100% that African people was here before Native Americans. We can prove that black people was in America before the Indians. The Indians themselves actually document the real natives, the real first people in America, as being black. We know that some Indians was black. We know there have been Indians who have written books about black Indians. So we know for a fact that we were already in America way before Native Americans, way before slavery and all that. This is documented. This has already been proven scientifically. And again, it goes back to that question. What is it about us that they know about us that they don't want us to know? So during the time of slavery, they were doing some horrible things to the slaves. Now, we all read the Willie Lynch letter. We know what it entails. But the reason for the whole Willie Lynch experiment was supposed to be about, disciplining the slaves, making them do their work, keeping them focused, because for some reason they were saying the slaves wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. And I find that hard to believe, because once you tar and feather a man and you tie his arms and legs to the end of horses and you set him on fire, and you let two horses rip them apart, I think that's going to be a clear enough message for the rest of the slaves not to fuck around. Once you whip a man to death with a whip, once you nail him to the ground and you beat him and leave his body in the sun with open cuts and you pour salt on it, once you hang a man in front of a bunch of black people, I think that it's going to be a good enough message for the rest of the black people not to fuck around. So what the Willie Lynch letter was about, what that whole psychological aspect of slavery was about control. It was about breaking the unity. As I was saying earlier, our unity, the unity of black people, and something that happens once we unify. So Willie Lynch outlined in his letter that the psychological aspects of his system will last for over 300 years. Now, we've seen some of the things that they did to implement the whole Willie Lynch syndrome. Now, we have to really look at the psychological aspects of it. And when you really start looking at it, you kind of understand why they gave the slaves certain jobs. You had the house nigga, the field nigga, the cotton picker. And of course, if you worked in a house, you was better than anybody who worked outside. So what does this do? This creates a separation. It creates a divide within the people, because you have the house slaves talking down to the field niggas. And you have a distrust there, because you don't know if the house slave is going to tell on you, if the house slave is going to have you beaten or whatever. You don't know. So there's no unity there. Then you have the white slave master taking the black slave woman as his mistress, having kids by her, but then treating her real good and giving her power over the other slave women. Okay, now, so we can kind of get off of slavery. Now, I want you to stay with me, stay with me, because I'm building up to something. I have to lay this groundwork down. I'm building it up because I have to lay this groundwork in so you can understand these things first. So when we get to the major parts, you can have your eureka moment. You can be like, oh, well, you can start to see why. You can understand why. So I have to lay this groundwork first. I have to show you this history, so you can have that moment, so you can understand and put everything together, and you can really get what the system is about. But you have to know these things first. Now, slavery ended, of course, and that's one of the biggest debated things about what happened after slavery was over. Lincoln freed the slaves. We know it was a lot of bullshit back and forth as to the real reason why. Now, when you look at history, you can kind of see what really happened. And we know the South was, of course, making so much money. The North was not doing so well, it was problems. So, the only way to really combat that was to abolish slavery, weaken the South, and set the people free, But it's so much more to that, and we ain't got enough time to get into why that was really, really done. But in any case, Lincoln freed the slaves. Okay, so before I go past the 1930s, I really want you to understand something. After over 400 years of slavery in America, after we was free and a lot of black people starved to death, we went through a rough time after slavery for a little while. Guess what? Black people flourish because we are built like that. When we come together, these free slaves, they united under a common goal to survive, to be successful, to be something. And they did well. With documentaries like Hidden Colors 1, 2, and 3, they show you that we invented a lot of things. We had a lot of inventions stolen from us. And you also have to remember, we were the ones running all the farms. We was the one plowing and doing all the agricultural things and taking care of the white man's business. So we knew the business. We knew how to do things. We knew we had labor skills. So we were able to do great things. So don't let them tell you that we was poor after slavery, that we needed the white man's help, we needed their welfare. Don't let them tell you that, because we know for a fact Black Wall Street was the absolute apex of success for the black person after slavery. Now, if you don't know about Black Wall Street, take a look at this and see what I'm talking about.
The date was June 1st, 1921, when Black Wall Street, the name fittingly given to one of the most affluent all-black communities in America, was bombed from the air and burned to the ground by mobs of envious whites. In a period spanning fewer than 12 hours, a once thriving 36-block black business district in northern Tulsa lay smoldering, a model community destroyed, and a major African-American economic movement resoundingly diffused. The night's carnage left some 3,000 African-Americans dead and over 600 successful businesses lost. Amongst these were 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, and 2 movie theaters, plus a hospital, a bank, a post office, libraries, schools, law offices, and a half dozen private airplanes, and even a bus system. As could be expected, the impetus behind it all was the infamous Ku Klux Klan working in consort with ranking city officials and many other sympathizers. The description of Black Wall Street, or Little Africa as it was also known, would be to liken it to a mini Beverly Hills. It was the golden door of the black community during the early 1900s, and it proved that African Americans had successful business infrastructure. That's what Black Wall Street was all about. The dollar circulated 36 to 1,000 times, sometimes taking an entire year for the currency to leave the community. Now, in 2009, a dollar left the black community in less than 6 hours. As far as resources, there were PhDs residing in Little Africa, black attorneys and doctors. One doctor was Dr. Berry, who also owned the bus system. His average income was $500 a day, a hefty pocket of change in 1910. During that era, physicians owned medical schools. There were also pawn shops everywhere, jewelry stores, churches, restaurants, and movie theaters. It was a time when the entire state of Oklahoma had only 2 airports, yet 6 blacks owned their own airplanes. It was a very fascinating community. The area encompassed over 600 businesses in a 36 square block area with a population of 15,000 African Americans. And when the lower economic Europeans looked over and saw what the black community created, many of them were jealous. When the average student went to school on Black Wall Street, he wore a suit and tie because of the morals and respect that they were taught at a young age. The mainstay of the community was to educate every child. Nepotism was a word they passionately believed in. The main thoroughfare was Greenwood Avenue, and it was intersected by Archer and Pine Streets. From the first letters of each of these names, you get GAP, and that's where the renowned R&B music group The Gap Band got its name. They were from Tulsa. Black Wall Street was a prime example of the typical black community in America that did business. But it was in an unusual location. You see, at that time, Oklahoma was set aside to be a black and Indian state. There were over 28 black townships there. 1/3 of the people who traveled in the terrifying Trail of Tears alongside the Indians between 1830 to 1842 were black people. The citizens of this proposed Indian and black state chose a black governor, a treasurer from Kansas named McDade. But the Ku Klux Klan said that if he assumed office, that they would kill him in less than 48 hours. A lot of blacks owned farmland, and many of them had gone into the oil business. The community was so tight and wealthy because they traded dollars hand to hand, and because they were dependent upon one another as a result of the Jim Crow laws. It was not unusual that if a resident's home accidentally burned down, it could be rebuilt within a few weeks by neighbors. This was the type of scenario that was going on day to day on Black Wall Street. When blacks intermarried into the Indian culture, some of them did receive their promised 40 acres and a mule, and with that came whatever oil was later found on the properties. On Black Wall Street, a lot of global business was conducted. The community flourished from the early 1900s until June 1st, 1921. That's when the largest massacre of non-military Americans in the history of this country took place, and it was led by the Ku Klux Klan. Imagine walking out of your front door and seeing 1,500 homes being burned. It must have been horrifying. Interviewed survivors believe that the whole thing was planned due to the fact that white families with their children stood around on the borders of the community and watched the massacre, the looting, everything, much in the same way they would watch a lynching. The spectator activity is where the word picnic is derived from. You see, it was typical to have community gatherings on Friday evenings in Oklahoma. The word was short for pick a nigger, to lynch that is. They would lynch a black male and cut off body parts as souvenirs. This went on every weekend in this country. That's where the term really came from. The cause of the massacre was simply racial economic jealousy. A lot of white folks had come back from World War I, and they were poor. When they looked over into the black communities and realized that black men who fought in the war had come home as heroes, and that helped trigger the destruction. It cost the black community everything, and not a single dime of restitution, no insurance claims, has ever been awarded to the victims to this day.
So you can see that, as I was talking about earlier, once black people unify, once we come together and we do something great, because you know what? Modern day, you hear it all the time. White people say, oh, black people are just lazy. Oh, they don't want to do nothing. You will see throughout this video, and you will see in history, every instance, every time that black people has unified and come together in success, we were taken down by white people. We were taken down by jealous people. Our whole situation was destroyed every time we came together and united and had success. I was showing you before about the Songhai people. They came together, they was united. It doesn't matter what religion we are under. When we come together, we flourish. The Songhai people was doing well, they were taken down. You see Black Wall Street taken down. Whenever we come together, and I'm going to show you a couple more instances in this video that happened, we are taken down. So we see Black Wall Street was great. We were doing great things. And that's in the 20s. That was in the 1920s. So this whole thing is going to bring me to one of my heroes, one of my favorite people of all time, of course, Marcus Garvey. Now, you got to understand, Marcus Garvey did everything I'm talking about, this system. Marcus Garvey knew something was up in America. He knew that we could not get it done here. We needed to go back home. He knew what Africa really was. And today they have made you all ashamed of being African. They have made you ashamed of Africa and being associated with that country. But Marcus Garvey knew what it was. Now, if you've been watching and really paying attention to this video, you can see that there's a sort of tone to what I've been saying. And basically the tone is this: Black people are not going to be allowed to be successful as a people. They are not going to be allowed to unite as a people. And none of that is more evident than Marcus Garvey and what he tried to accomplish with the whole Pan-African movement. Now, as I said, Marcus Garvey knew what Africa was, and he wanted us to go back there and take that place over and show the African people what they really had, and that the land was rich in gold and diamonds and all precious minerals and oils and all kinds of stuff. And there's no way in the world we can have that humongous continent and still be so poor as a people. Marcus Garvey understood this. So one of the things we hear all the time: go back to Africa, go back to Africa. Here we were actually trying to go back to Africa and do something with ourselves, and they stopped that. The only reason why they didn't put a bullet in Garvey's head is because he was too powerful. He had millions of followers, and they were afraid of what might happen if they done that. So of course they used a brother to set him up, and he was arrested, and they told him, you know what, if you plead guilty and decide to never come back to America, we'll set you free. And that's what happened. That was the end of Garvey. Now, this is going to take me to the civil rights movement, because this is where the system really starts to come into play. Now, we started the system off with us coming to America and becoming subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But now in the 60s, this is where it really starts to come into play in a big way. Okay, so Black people, you have to really understand, during the 60s, we were not running around super poor. We owned more businesses back then than we do today. The dollar stayed in the Black community because we wasn't allowed to take it nowhere else to spend it in the white communities. We didn't go there. The dollar circulated in our communities probably 100 times before it probably left and went somewhere else. We were doing well. The whole purpose of the civil rights movement was supposedly to integrate, but you need to understand, more Black people wanted to not integrate than to integrate. It was a small amount of Black people who was followers of Dr. King, who was mostly Christians that followed him because he was a reverend, who wanted to integrate. Most Black people was like, no, we are fine. Now, we just want the same respect when we walk down the street. We don't care about going and go sit on some bench. Why would you want to go into a restaurant and sit where you know you're not wanted? Why would you want to go use the same bathroom as people who you know don't want you there? Why would you risk having dogs bite you, water cannons, and clubs beating you up the back of your head? Why would you go through all of that? All of that, really? I mean, just to eat where a white person eat? I mean, what was that about? You have to really understand the whole plot behind the civil rights movement. And you know, Malcolm X wasn't for it, of course, and he spoke out against it a little bit. And I want you to listen to what he had to say.
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the Bloodhound or resisting the Ku Klux Klan by teaching them to love their enemy or pray for those who use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom did on the plantation to keep those Negroes defenseless. The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to give Negroes a chance to sit in a segregated restaurant beside the same white man who had brutalized them for 400 years. The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to get Negroes to forgive the people who have brutalized them for 400 years by lulling them to sleep and making them forgetting what those whites have done to them. But the masses of black people in America today don't go for what Martin Luther King is putting down. As you said in one of your articles, it's psychologically insecure, or something of that sort. I forget how you put it. But you didn't endorse what Martin Luther King was doing yourself.
What you have to understand is the whole civil rights movement was planned out. It was part of their plan, whether you want to believe it or not. But when I finish this little segment here, you're going to agree with me that it was a whole setup. It was part of their plan. As I was saying before, you have to understand, black people, we were doing well. We were doing good. The black family was 10 times as well off as the black family is today. The black family was intact. Mom, dad, kids, all together in the household. We were doing well. We was doing well in sports. Our celebrities was doing well. We had a lot of music stars in the 60s. We all know this. They was performing in a lot of white schools. Black people were doing fine. The whole purpose of integration was to bring about this system, to expand the system that we are going to be really digging into as time goes on. You have to realize that they put so many things in place to keep us from being successful as a people, and we still was successful. They put so many laws in place, because you have to realize the whole Rosa Parks thing, the whole sit in the back of the bus thing, that wasn't like the bus company's rules or something like that. That was state law. That was a law by the government that black people had to sit in the back. That wasn't a bus company rule. That was state law. It was a state law. This is part of the whole Jim Crow thing. This was state law that whites only, blacks only. This was law. It wasn't that, some store was being prejudiced. Although I'm pretty sure that, if it wasn't law, then some, white business owners wouldn't want black people in their stores. But this was law. And then people had rights too. They had a right not to serve you even after, it was over. But it was law. It wasn't that these people were just being prejudiced. It was law. So the whole thing is they put so many things in place because the whole purpose was us to just, serve the white people, only be able to get jobs as, cleaning white people's houses and cleaning, doing trash and dumb shit like that. But we were doing well in trade. We was trading with China. We was trading with foreign countries. We were doing well. We was going to colleges. We were doing well in the music industry. We were doing big things. Black people, we was growing. Despite all the shit they put in our way, we still was growing, and they had to stop that. You have to understand, there was no apology after slavery. There was no remedy for the hatred between black and white people, because what they should have done, because you gotta realize this, not only was psychological games played on black people, but white people as well, because they told white people a host of things to get them to fear us and hate us and treat us other than human. We all know about the human zoo. We know about the zoos where they had black people and they was feeding them bananas and telling people that they descended from apes and they was monkeys or bald monkeys. We know about all that. We know about the whole rabbit's blood thing. We know all about the different crazy things they told white people to get them to hate us, how we was cursed by God and how we was demons and all kinds of stuff. They told white people a host of things to get them to fear us and not like us. And after slavery was over, even going all the way up into the 60s, nothing was done to combat the hate and the fear that white people had against black people. Now, had a system been put in place to gradually bring white people into the being able to be around black people and understanding that we are just like them, then the 60s would have been way better. everything would have been better by this time, because it would have been a system in place to let white people know that we was wrong when we enslaved these people. We had a different mind frame back then. Everything was different, and these people was wrong, and what happened was wrong. But you're going to start to see why they never did that and how that aided them in this whole system as we go along. You know, integration should have taken place on a gradual level. It should have taken place naturally instead of being forced on black people and white people, because there wasn't enough known, you know, about the two races for us to come together and be forced to come together like that. You know, white people still had their fears, and of course, black people, we still hated white people. And it wasn't enough done to bridge that gap before they forced integration on us, and that is by design. Because once white people would have known that we was just like them, and as a matter of fact, on a genetic level, they are inferior to us, then of course they would have looked at us totally differently. On a genetic level, we are way better than white people. Our organs are better. Our kids, they learn faster than their kids. Our kids walk faster than their kids. This is all documented stuff. This is all stuff that we know. And, you know, our skin is better. Everything about us is better than them on a genetic level. That's a fact. But, of course, they had to do it this way to maintain the status quo of white dominance over black people and keep all those stereotypes in place so they could look down at us and, you know, make themselves feel better than us. So integration was forced on us, and that was by design. Now, I believe that the whole civil rights movement was a part of their agenda. I believe they came to Dr. King with the whole plan of, you know, integration and the whole civil rights movement. And, you know, it probably sounded good to him. And I think later on he figured out that they was using him, and this whole thing was a setup. And as you can see later on in his speeches, he began to speak out against the war. He began to do things to really help black people. And, you know, they really killed him for speaking out against the war. I mean, they blew JFK head off for stopping the war. So, of course, you know, it was going to kill Dr. King for later speaking on it. Now, it's a lot of things that we don't know about Dr. King, and I have to reveal them in this video because you need to understand these things, understand that the man wasn't squeaky clean. You know, they had things on him. It was things about him that will prove my point that they wanted Dr. King to succeed, because they had a lot of dirt on this man. You got to really understand, if they did not want Dr. King, his whole civil rights movement to be successful, one, you wouldn't have heard about it. It wouldn't have been all over the radios back then. It wouldn't have been all over the TVs and the newspapers back then. If you really want to silence somebody, you just don't talk about them. You don't talk about them in the media. Of course they own the media. Of course they own the newspaper. You just shut up. You don't print nothing. You don't say nothing. And if they wanted to get rid of him, they could have killed him a long time ago. But he completed his plan, the process was done, and they killed him when they didn't need him no more. It was already done. Now, we all know who JFK was, and we know about his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is Jacqueline Kennedy, she spoke to Bobby Kennedy, telling her that the FBI had tapes on Dr. King. And on these tapes that the FBI had was Dr. King supposedly, you know, buying hookers, and supposedly it was a big thing known amongst the FBI that Martin Luther King, he cheated on his wife multiple times, and he was involved in orgies, and he was always trying to get women. This was supposed to be a big thing known. Now, if you don't read about Dr. King and all of the other stuff, like his plagiarism and all that kind of stuff that's supposed to be relevant in his early career, if you don't read about all that, you wouldn't know about this stuff because they don't want you to know. Now, you got to understand, they knew all of this stuff during the time King was alive. So if they really wanted to discredit him, they could have used these things, but they didn't, because they wanted King to succeed. Now, back to these tapes. Now, of course, eventually, when Dr. King started to act up, when he figured this whole thing out, when he started to go against what they was telling him to do, they sent one of the tapes to Coretta Scott King. And supposedly, she waited 6 weeks before she played it. And when she heard it, of course, it caused trouble within the marriage. Now, that's one of the reasons why we know these tapes are real, and you can actually go and fill out a petition and try to get one of the tapes through the Freedom of Information Act. But when I checked it out, they won't release them until the year 2027. So in 2027, you can actually hear these audio tapes. Now, Jacqueline Kennedy actually did something exactly like that, which is one of the reasons why we want to believe, well, we know it's true, one, from the accounts of Coretta Scott King, and one of the other reasons is because of this audio tape. Now, Jacqueline Kennedy, after the whole JFK assassination and all that, she sat down and she recorded 8 hours, for 8 hours of her, an 8-hour interview of her talking about everything, the whole presidency with JFK and him being killed. And she also spoke about Dr. King and what JFK said about him, and she spoke about those tapes. Now you have to understand, before you think that this is just some white woman saying whatever the hell, you have to understand that she knew that, excuse me, she knew that no one would hear these audio tapes until 50 years later. And that was the whole agreement upon her sitting down and doing an interview, that they will not play the tapes until 50 years later when she's gone and everybody else is gone who she's talking about in the video. I mean, in the audio tapes. So you can go actually buy these tapes, and I had to actually buy this recording because I couldn't find it nowhere. I tried to get it off a torrent, but I couldn't find it. Nobody has it because people don't care about this kind of stuff. So I had to actually buy it for the purposes of this video. So when you listen to it, she's speaking about it. So I want you to take a listen and listen to what she said about the whole Martin Luther King and women. Now,